I'll never forget the sound of that champagne saber slicing through the foil. It was crisp, deliberate, like a guillotine. My husband Adrian stood there in my family's century-old wine cellar, the one my father built stone by stone, holding a 1945 Chateau Margaux worth more than most people's cars. And he wasn't opening it for me. He was opening it for her, Sienna, 24 years old, blonde hair cascading over her shoulder like she was in a shampoo commercial, phone propped up on a triple, live streaming to 300,000 people. "This is what real luxury looks like, guys," she purred into the camera, running her manicured fingers along the barrel racks. "Not like that sad old woman upstairs who thinks she still matters." She didn't even say my name. She didn't have to. The comments were already ripping me apart. Adrian popped the cork with a flourish, and the sound echoed through the vaulted stone ceiling. He poured 2 glasses, handed one to Sienna, and then, God, this is the part that still makes my blood run cold. He looked directly into her camera and said, "I have an announcement. As of today, Vance Estate Vineyards, valued at $50 million, belongs to Sienna Holt. All of it. The land, the label, the legacy. She's earned it," Sienna squealed, threw her arms around his neck, and kissed him like I didn't exist, like my father's life's work didn't exist. The chat exploded with heart emojis and congratulations. I stood at the top of the stone staircase, my security guard Marco beside me, watching my entire world get handed to a woman who couldn't tell a Pinot Noir from a gas station wine cooler. And that's when Sienna saw me. "Oh my God," she laughed, pointing at me like I was a rat that had wandered in from the vineyard. "Adrian, your ex-wife is here. Didn't you tell her she's trespassing?" She grabbed her glass and walked toward me, hips swaying, live stream still rolling. "Honey, this is my winery now. You need to leave before I call the cops." And then, I swear to God, I watched it happen in slow motion. She flicked her wrist and threw an entire glass of 1945 Margaux at me. The deep red wine hit my white Dior dress like a slap, spreading across the silk like blood. The chat went insane. Adrian stepped forward, his face smug, confident, entitled, "Victoria, you heard her. Get out. I'm the CEO now, and you're done." He actually thought he could throw me out of my own estate. He actually believed he owned it. And that's when I smiled. Because Adrian never bothered to read the fine print. I pulled the tablet from Marco's hands, tapped twice, and the projector mounted in the cellar wall hummed to life. The contract appeared on the stone wall in crisp glowing letters. Vance Estate Holdings, LLC, sole owner. Victoria Margaret, Vance. Adrian's face went white. I tapped the screen again, and his phone buzzed. Then again, then again. Amex Platinum, card declined. Chase Sapphire, account frozen. Tesla app, vehicle immobilized. I looked at Sienna, still holding her phone, her smile finally cracking. "Marco," I said softly, "escort them off my property. And Sienna, send me the dry cleaning bill for my dress. I'll add it to what you already owe me." The rain started the second Marco locked the iron gate behind them. Not a drizzle, a full biblical downpour that turned the gravel driveway into a river of mud. I watched from the security camera feed in my office as Adrian pounded on the gate, his Tom Ford suit already soaked through, screaming something I couldn't hear over the storm. Sienna stood beside him in her little white cocktail dress, the one she'd worn for the live stream, mascara running down her face like war paint. She wasn't laughing anymore. She was shouting at him, jabbing her finger into his chest, and I could read her lips. "You said you owned this place." Adrian tried to calm her down, but she shoved him away. The confidence, the arrogance, it was all melting off them like cheap mascara. Adrian pulled out his phone, probably trying to call his driver, James. I'd already called James myself 20 minutes earlier. "Mr. Vance no longer employs you," I'd told him. "I do. And I'm giving you a raise." James had been with us for 7 years. I doubled his salary on the spot. "Understood, Mrs. Vance," he'd said without hesitation. So when Adrian's call went straight to voicemail, I watched his face change on that camera feed, the panic starting to bloom. They had no car, no credit cards that worked, no way home. Sienna tried her own phone next, scrolling frantically. But when your accounts are frozen, the apps stop working real fast. I watched her throw her phone into her purse and scream something at Adrian. He pointed toward the main road, 2 miles away, and started walking. She followed, those Louboutins sinking with every step. It took them 43 minutes to walk those 2 miles. At one point, Sienna sat down on a rock and refused to keep going. Adrian had to physically pull her up. By the time they reached the highway, she'd abandoned the heels entirely and was walking barefoot, sobbing, her dress torn at the hem. A passing truck splashed them with rainwater, and Adrian actually fell to his knees in the mud. They stumbled down Route 29 until they found the Sunrise Motel, a $59 a night place with a flickering neon sign. The kind of place Adrian Vance, Stanford MBA, had never set foot in before. I tracked Adrian's phone to room 12 and imagined what that room looked like. Stained carpet, a bed that creaked, the kind of place that rents by the hour. Inside that motel room, Adrian must have been spinning his story, pacing, trying to convince Sienna that this was all temporary. A banking error. He probably swore he'd sue me, take half of everything, destroy me in court. Sienna wanted to believe him. She had to, because if Adrian was actually broke, then she'd just destroyed her entire career for nothing. For a man who couldn't even afford an Uber home. But doubt was creeping in. And Adrian, soaking wet, broke, locked out of his own life, was starting to realize something that terrified him. I wasn't just angry, I was prepared, and this wasn't a fight, it was an execution. The rain didn't stop until 3 a.m. By then, I'd slept soundly for 8 hours. Adrian and Sienna, they probably didn't sleep at all. Sienna posted the edited video at 6:47 a.m. I was in the vineyard when my phone started buzzing. Texts, emails, calls from my PR team, all saying the same thing. "Victoria, you need to see this." I opened Instagram, and there it was. The live stream from the cellar, but cut, spliced, manipulated into something completely unrecognizable. In Sienna's version, I wasn't standing calmly at the top of the stairs. The footage made it look like I was charging at her, aggressive, out of control. The wine she threw at me, completely edited out. Instead, it looked like I shoved her, and she stumbled backward, Adrian catching her like some kind of hero. "She attacked me," Sienna sobbed into the camera. "I was just celebrating with Adrian, and his psychotic ex-wife physically assaulted me. I'm literally shaking right now. This woman is dangerous." The caption read, "Breaking. Billionaire heiress violently attacks innocent woman. This is what privilege looks like. Justice for Sienna to cancel Vance Wines." Within an hour, it had 200,000 views. Within 2 hours, 500,000. By noon, to cancel Vance Wines was trending #1 in the United States. People who'd never tasted my wine were calling me a monster, a bitter old woman who couldn't handle being replaced. My Instagram DMs filled with death threats. A TikToker with 4 million followers called me the real-life Cruella de Vil. News outlets picked it up. TMZ ran a segment. HuffPost published an opinion piece titled, "Victoria Vance and the Ugly Face of Wealth-Based Abuse." They didn't fact-check. They just ran with Sienna's narrative because it fit the story people wanted to believe. By 2 p.m., the real damage started. Sales dropped 18% in 6 hours. Restaurants were pulling us from their lists. A boutique hotel chain canceled a $300,000 order. And then Richard Pemberton called, my lead investor. "Victoria, the board met this morning. We're concerned. This scandal is affecting stock value. We think it's best if you step down. Temporarily." I smiled, even though he couldn't see me. Richard, do you know what majority shareholder means? It means I own 51% of this company. You can't remove me. And if you try, I'll replace the entire board by Monday. Silence. Now, you're going to tell the board to shut up, sit tight, and trust me. Because in about 2 weeks, every single person canceling us right now is going to look like a fool. Understood? He sighed. I hope you know what you're doing. I always do, I said, and hung up. But the public narrative was spiraling faster than I'd anticipated. Sienna was doing Instagram lives every 6 hours, each one more dramatic than the last. Adrian stood beside her in every video, playing the protective boyfriend. He looked confident again, like he'd found his comeback. Meanwhile, I sat in my father's office, watching my legacy burn on social media, and I made a single phone call. Martin, I said, tell me you found something. Martin Cruz, forensic accountant, sighed. Victoria, I found everything. Offshore accounts in the Caymans, shell companies, wire transfers to Sienna's accounts dating back 14 months. He's been stealing from you for over a year. How much? About $4.2 million. I closed my eyes. Can you prove it in court? Already building the case. Give me another week. You have 3 days, I said. Because while the world was busy canceling me, I was building something they'd never see coming. And Adrian had no idea the paper trail he'd left behind. Adrian broke into the lab on a Tuesday night. I know because the motion sensors sent an alert to my phone at 11:43 p.m. Unauthorized access, fermentation lab. I was in bed, reading, and when I saw the notification, my heart didn't race. I didn't panic. I just reached for my tablet, pulled up the security feed, and watched. Adrian slipped through the side door with a key he must have copied months ago. He wasn't alone. There was a man with him, mid-40s, wearing gloves, carrying a duffel bag. Professional. They moved through the lab like they'd rehearsed this. Adrian knew exactly where he was going. Straight for my father's desk, the old oak one in the corner where Dad sat every harvest season, writing notes by hand in his leather journal. That journal was worth more than gold. 40 years of my father's life. Fermentation temperatures, barrel rotations, the exact mineral composition of our soil, blend ratios he'd spent decades perfecting. Adrian grabbed it like it was a library book, flipped through it under his phone's flashlight, and that greedy smile spread across his face. But he didn't stop there. He took samples, bottles from the 2018 Reserve, the 2020 Cabernet that won double gold at San Francisco, even a vial of our proprietary yeast strain my father cultivated from wild grapes in the 1980s. His partner bagged everything methodically, labeling each item. They spent 22 minutes in that lab. I could have stopped them. One phone call to the police and they'd have been arrested on site. But I didn't move. I just watched Adrian steal my father's legacy, and I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not rage, clarity. Because here's what Adrian didn't know. My father never wrote down the final step. He was paranoid about exactly this. Someone stealing his work, cutting corners, ruining what he'd built. So he kept the most important detail out of that journal entirely. He told me the real secret on his deathbed 3 years ago when pancreatic cancer finally took him. I was holding his hand in hospice, and he pulled me close. Victoria, he whispered. The journal has everything except one thing. 18 months in French oak, then 6 weeks cold stabilization at exactly 32 degrees. Most winemakers skip it because it's expensive and slow. But that's what makes ours different. Promise me you'll never tell anyone. I promised. And I kept that promise. Adrian thought he had everything he needed. He left through the same door, loaded everything into a black SUV, and drove away with the headlights off. I saved the security footage to 3 separate drives and sent copies to Martin and Jeffrey. Evidence for later. Then I poured myself a glass of 2015 Pinot and waited. Because stolen recipes are like counterfeit money. They look real until you try to use them. 3 weeks later, Adrian announced his new venture, Phoenix Wines. The branding was shameless. A gold phoenix logo, flames licking the edges, tagline, "Born from ashes, perfected by passion." He did a press conference in San Francisco, Sienna by his side in a red power suit. "We're bringing world-class winemaking to the people," he declared. Same award-winning taste as Vance Estate, but at half the price, no elitism, no gatekeeping. The audience clapped, and I watched the live stream, taking notes. He'd secured $8 million from private investors, Victor Molina, Dmitry Kozlov, Chen Wei. These weren't venture capitalists. They were vultures, the kind who demand 40% returns in 6 months, or they start breaking kneecaps. And Adrian had given them collateral: the vineyard, the estate, the cars, the beach house, property he thought he still owned. Property with my name on every deed. I leaned back in my chair, sipped my wine, and thought, let him build his empire on quicksand. Let him promise the world. Because when it all collapses, and it will collapse, I'll be standing there with a shovel, ready to bury him. I found out about the stolen journal officially on a Thursday morning when my head of operations, David Chen, knocked on my office door looking pale. "Victoria, we have a problem. The fermentation logs are gone from the server. And your father's notebook. It's not in the safe." He waited for me to react, to panic. I didn't. I just nodded slowly and said, "I know." David blinked. "You know. For how long?" 2 weeks. Since the night it happened." His mouth opened, closed. "Victoria, why didn't you... Shouldn't we call the police? That journal is priceless. It's your father's entire legacy." "The journal is incomplete," I interrupted. I walked to the window overlooking the vineyard. My father was paranoid. He knew jealousy exists in every industry, so he never wrote down the final step. David stared at me. "What final step?" "The one that makes our wine worth $200 a bottle instead of $20. The one Adrian is about to learn the hard way." I explained the 18-month aging process, the cold stabilization that most winemakers skip. Adrian has the recipe, but he doesn't have the patience. And patience isn't something you can steal. David looked uncomfortable. "So you're just letting him fail?" "I'm letting him hang himself," I said. I told David not to report the break-in, not to file insurance claims. "If people ask about the journal, tell them it's in a secure location," which is true. It's in Adrian's hands, and that's exactly where I want it. David adjusted his glasses. "Victoria, I've known you since you were 16. I watched your father teach you everything, and I've never seen you like this." "Like what?" "Cold, calculated. Your father would have gone to the police immediately." I looked at him directly. My father never had someone steal 40 years of his work and give it to his mistress. So forgive me if I'm not following his playbook. 2 days later, I boarded a plane to Bordeaux, first class, alone. I wore oversized sunglasses and made sure to look exhausted at Charles de Gaulle Airport. My assistant accidentally leaked a photo, me at the gate, staring out the window with wine. The tabloids picked it up within hours. Page 6, disgraced wine heiress flees to France. Daily Mail, is Victoria Vance having a breakdown? Perfect. Let them think I was running. Let Adrian think I'd given up. But I wasn't running. I was shopping. In Bordeaux, I had lunch with Laurent Beaumont, a private equity broker who specialized in distressed debt acquisitions. We sat at a cafe in Saint-Emilion, and I slid a folder across the table. Inside were the names of Adrian's investors, Victor Molina, Dmitry Kozlov, Chen Wei. "I want to buy their position," I said simply. Laurent raised an eyebrow. "These are not pleasant people. They'll want a premium." I'll pay 40% above face value, I said. Laurent smiled. And I assume you want this done discreetly? Through shell companies, offshore. Layered. At least 3 holding companies between my name and the debt. Make it untraceable. Of course, Laurent said, lifting his wine glass. To invisible empires. Within 7 days, I owned every dollar of Adrian's debt. $8 million in principal plus penalties, interest, late fees, all hidden behind holdings with names like Archstone Capital and Belvedere Equity Group. Adrian thought he owed money to Victor and his crew. He had no idea he owed it to me. That every payment he missed, every deadline he blew, was digging him deeper into a hole I'd already bought and owned. I spent the rest of the week in Paris, had dinner at Le Cinq, saw an opera, posted nothing on social media. The world thought I was hiding. But really, I was just waiting for Adrian to finish building his house of cards so I could walk up and blow on it. When I flew back to California, David met me with an update. Adrian's production is a mess, cutting every corner, using cheaper barrels, bottling wine that's barely been aged 3 months. I looked at the photos, inconsistent temperatures, bottles being filled on an assembly line. How long until launch? 6 weeks. He's hosting a gala, press, critics, investors. I smiled. Good, let him. Adrian and Sienna burned through that $8 million like it was monopoly money. I watched it happen through Martin's forensic reports. $120,000 on a Lamborghini Urus, least not bought ni $85,000 for a brand strategy consultant, who was actually Sienna's former yoga instructor, $200,000 to reserve the Peterson Automotive Museum for their launch party, non-refundable. They rented a Tribeca penthouse for $45,000 a month, flew to Ibiza on a private jet for a business retreat that was just bottle service and yacht photos. Sienna posted every dollar they spent, designer bags, champagne towers, helicopter rides with captions like, "Building an empire with my king." The comments ate it up. Her follower count climbed back to 1.8 million. Meanwhile, the actual wine production was a disaster. I had a contact at the bottling facility, Louis Stade, who owed me a favor. He sent me photos every few days, barrels stacked wrong, fermentation tanks with wildly inconsistent temperatures, some at 68 degrees, some at 55, some in the 80s where yeast dies and wine turns to vinegar, bottles being filled after only 10 weeks of aging instead of 18 months. They're rushing everything to meet the launch deadline, Louise told me. No cold stabilization, no filtering. I tried to tell the floor manager, but Adrian wants it done fast and cheap. How does it taste? I asked. Louise laughed, not a kind sound. Victoria, I've been making wine since I was 16. This stuff is garbage, harsh tannins, no complexity, thin body. Perfect, I said. Don't tell them anything. Let them bottle it exactly as it is. Then the invitation arrived, hand-delivered in a cream envelope with gold foil lettering. Oh, you are cordially invited to the Phoenix Wines Launch Gala. Join us as we redefine luxury winemaking. Black tie optional. Bitterness not welcome. Inside was a handwritten note from Sienna. Victoria, I know this might be hard for you to watch, but Adrian thought you deserved a front row seat to see what real success looks like. No hard feelings. XOXO-S. I read it twice, then laughed so hard I had to sit down. The audacity was almost beautiful. They wanted me there. Wanted me to watch them win, to see Adrian's empire validated while I sat humiliated. Except they'd miscalculated. Because I wasn't powerless. I owned their debt. I had evidence of every crime. And I knew their wine was undrinkable. I went to my private wine cellar, 3 levels below the main house, and found what I was looking for on the lowest shelf. A 1997 vintage from my father's early career. An experiment that failed spectacularly. The wine had turned to vinegar within 2 years. Dad kept the bottles as a reminder that even masters fail. I had 1 bottle polished until it gleamed, wrapped in white silk, tied with a satin ribbon and shipped to Phoenix Wines with a card. For your launch, may it be everything you deserve. V. 2 days later, Adrian called, furious. What the hell is this supposed to mean? I could hear Sienna in the background asking what was wrong. It's a gift, Adrian, I said sweetly. A preview. A preview of what? I paused. Let the silence stretch. Of what happens when you rush perfection. See you at the gala. I hung up. Then I went shopping for the perfect dress. Something devastating. I found it in San Francisco. A black Valentino gown with a slit to mid-thigh. Off-shoulder. Elegant but lethal. I paired it with my grandmother's diamond necklace, 3 carats surrounded by sapphires. When people saw me walk into that gala, I wanted them to wonder, why is she so calm? Why isn't she hiding? What does she know that we don't? The Peterson Automotive Museum at night looked like a fever dream. Glass and steel and exotic cars displayed like sculptures under dramatic lighting. Ferraris? Lamborghinis? A 1962 Shelby Cobra worth millions. Adrian had chosen it deliberately, a temple to luxury that screamed, I've made it. I arrived at 7:22 p.m., exactly 22 minutes late. My driver pulled up to the red carpet, and when I stepped out, the camera flashes started immediately. Pop, 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 blinding white light. I didn't pose. I just walked, my Valentino gown catching the light, my grandmother's diamonds glittering. The room went quiet when I entered. Not silent, but there was a shift. A ripple. Heads turned. Whispers started. I smiled, not big, just a small curve of my lips that said, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Sienna saw me first. She was near the bar in a gold sequined gown, and her face went through shock, panic, then a forced smile. Victoria, oh my God, you came! She glided over, champagne in hand. I wasn't sure you'd actually show up. This must be so hard for you. Not at all, I said smoothly. I wouldn't miss this for the world. Adrian appeared, his hand going to Sienna's back, possessive. He looked good in his Tom Ford tuxedo, but his eyes gave him away. Something tight. Nervous. Victoria, glad you could make it. I hope there are no hard feelings. None whatsoever, I said, meeting his gaze. I'm just here to see what you've built. His smile faltered for a fraction of a second. Well, you're in for a treat. I'm sure I am, I said, and walked away. The room was packed with everyone who mattered. Antonio Galoni, Jancis Robinson, sommeliers from Michelin-starred restaurants, investors in $1,000 suits. The tasting was scheduled for 8 p.m. Adrian took the stage at 8:03, Sienna beside him glowing. Thank you all for coming, he began. Tonight is about disrupting an industry that has been gatekept for too long. Phoenix Wines represents a new era. He held up a bottle. Dark glass, gold label, Phoenix logo glittering. This is the Phoenix Reserve Cabernet. Bold, complex, uncompromising, and half the price of anything comparable. The crowd applauded. Let's taste it, someone shouted. Adrian grinned, and the servers started pouring. I watched the critics receive their glasses, Antonio examining the color, Jancis checking the legs. This was the moment Adrian had been chasing. I took a glass, brought it to my nose. Vinegar. Acetone. A sharp smell that burned my sinuses. Oh God, it was worse than I'd imagined. Antonio took his first sip. His face changed, confusion, then disgust. He spat it into the dump bucket immediately, reaching for water. Jancis set her glass down like it was contaminated and walked to the bar asking for whiskey. One by one, critics tasted it and their faces told the story. A sommelier from the French Laundry gagged. Someone dumped their glass into a planter. What the hell is this? Someone shouted. The room buzzed with confusion and horror. I walked up to the stage, heels clicking. and held out my hand for the microphone. Adrian stared, too stunned to resist. I turned to the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank Adrian for this educational experience. My father spent 40 years learning that great wine isn't about shortcuts or stolen recipes or rushing production. It's about patience. It's about respecting the process. I held up my glass. Adrian, you stole the recipe, but you never learned the secret my father kept out of that journal. I poured the wine onto the stage floor. It pooled like blood under the lights. The room gasped. The final step is 18 months in French oak, then 6 weeks of cold stabilization at exactly 32 degrees. Most winemakers skip it because it's expensive and slow. But that's what makes the difference between exceptional wine and whatever this is. I set the microphone down and looked at Adrian. His jaw was clenched. His hands were shaking. His eyes looked like I'd ripped out his soul. "Enjoy the rest of your evening," I said softly, and walked off stage, leaving him standing there in front of 300 people, his empire turning to vinegar, his lies exposed, his future crumbling. The chaos started before I even made it off the stage. 3 men in dark suits pushed through the crowd like linebackers, moving with aggressive purpose. I recognized the lead guy immediately, Victor Molina, mid-50s, barrel-chested, the kind of face that's seen things you don't want to know about. He wasn't venture capital. He was a loan shark with a Stanford MBA and an LLC that made him look legitimate on paper. He walked straight up to Adrian, ignoring the cameras, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "We need to talk, now." His accent was slight, Eastern European, but his English was perfect and cold. Adrian tried to laugh it off, sweat beading on his forehead. "Victor, hey, not here. We can discuss this Monday." "You owe us $8 million, Victor interrupted, his voice flat. "Your product is undrinkable, your brand is destroyed. And according to our contract, if you fail to deliver ROI within the first fiscal quarter, we seize collateral immediately." He snapped his fingers, and one of his associates pulled out a tablet, showing Adrian a document. "These are the assets you listed as collateral: the Vance Estate Vineyard, the main residence, the beach house, the Tesla, the Tribeca penthouse. We start liquidation proceedings tomorrow morning." Adrian's face went from pale to gray. "Wait, no. I have those assets. They're mine. I can cover this. I just need time." "You have nothing," Victor said simply. And that's when Jeffrey appeared. Jeffrey Whitmore, my family's attorney for 30 years, emerged from the crowd like a ghost in a 3-piece suit. Silver hair perfectly combed, cufflinks glinting, carrying his leather briefcase. "Mr. Molina," he said, his British accent cutting through the noise, "if I may interrupt." Victor turned, annoyed. "Who the hell are you?" "Jeffrey Whitmore, counsel for Mrs. Victoria Vance, and I'm here to inform you that as of 9:17 a.m. yesterday, Mrs. Vance purchased your firm's entire position in Phoenix Wines through a private debt acquisition. The $8 million Mr. Vance owes, it now belongs to my client." He handed Victor a document. Victor scanned it, his jaw tightening, then looked at me. I was still near the stage, arms crossed. I smiled pleasantly. Victor folded the document, nodded once. "Smart," he said quietly. Then to Adrian, "Good luck." And he walked away, his job done. Jeffrey turned to Adrian, and the room held its breath. "Mr. Vance, you currently owe my client $12,300,000. Adrian's mouth fell open. "The 12? That's not. The loan was only 8. $8 million in principal, plus 18 months of accrued interest at the rate you agreed to, plus penalty fees for missed production benchmarks, plus late payment fees. It's all here, itemized." He pulled out another document. Adrian reached for it with a shaking hand, but didn't read it, just stared at the number. "I don't have $12 million, he whispered. "I'm aware," Jeffrey said. "Option 1, pay the full amount within 72 hours. Option 2, Declare bankruptcy? Which won't help since you don't own any of the collateral. It all belongs to Mrs. Vance. Option 3. My client pursues criminal charges for corporate fraud, theft of intellectual property, falsifying investor documents, and wire fraud across state lines. That's federal Mr. Vance, 10 to 15 years. The room was dead silent. Sienna stood frozen, mascara starting to run. And then she snapped. I saw it happen. Survival instincts overriding loyalty. She grabbed the microphone, and her voice cracked through the speakers. This is bullshit. Every head turned. Adrian didn't do anything wrong. I'm the victim here. He lied to me too. He said we had millions, that everything was his. She was spiraling, words tumbling out. He lied to me about everything. I gave up my whole career for him. And for what? Adrian reached for her. Sienna, stop talking. She yanked away violently. No, I'm not going down with you. I'm 24 years old. I had a future. She turned to the crowd, tears streaming. I faked the pregnancy, okay? There was never a baby. He wanted me to. He said it would make him look stable, family-oriented. He made me post those ultrasound pictures. The crowd erupted. Gasps, shouts, camera flashes exploding. I was manipulated by a con artist, Sienna screamed. I'm the real victim, not her. She pointed at me. The cameras turned, and I just stood there, one eyebrow raised, watching. I have proof, screenshots, voice memos of him admitting everything. And then she ran, literally ran off stage, sobbing, her gold gown tearing as she fled. The room exploded into chaos. Adrian stood alone on stage, surrounded by spilled wine and broken glass and the ruins of everything he'd tried to build. He looked at me one last time. And I looked back. No words, just acknowledgement. You did this to yourself. The police arrived exactly 18 minutes later. 2 LAPD officers walked into the museum calm and professional, completely unfazed by the chaos. The taller one, a woman with her hair pulled back tight, made a beeline for Adrian. Adrian Vance? He nodded, barely able to speak. Yes, I'm Adrian Vance. You're under arrest for corporate fraud, theft of intellectual property, wire fraud, and falsifying investor documents. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. She turned him around, right there on stage, in front of 300 people, and pulled his arms behind his back. The click of the handcuffs echoed through the sound system because his lapel mic was still on. Adrian looked at me as they led him toward the exit, his wrists bound, his tuxedo wrinkled and sweat-stained. Not angry, not defiant, just hollow, empty. Like a man who'd finally realized he'd gambled everything and lost. Our eyes met for maybe 3 seconds. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just watched him go. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not satisfaction, but a deep, bone-tired relief. Like I'd been holding my breath for months and could finally exhale. Sienna tried to leave through a side exit, but she'd underestimated how fast the internet works. By the time she made it to the parking lot, her phone was exploding. Her Instagram went from 1.8 million followers to 400,000 in under an hour. Her mentions were a wasteland of screenshots, her confession clipped and shared everywhere. I faked the pregnancy. That 7-second clip had already been viewed 2 million times. Her sponsors started dropping her in real time. You could refresh her Instagram and watch partnerships disappear. MVMT Watches has terminated its partnership. Fashion Nova has ended all collaboration. One by one, every income stream vanished. A TMZ reporter cornered her in the parking lot, shoving a microphone in her face. Sienna, do you regret faking your pregnancy? She didn't answer, just covered her face and ran, barefoot, throwing herself into an Uber that peeled out. I heard later she deleted all her social media by midnight. 3 million followers. Gone. Her agent dropped her. Last I heard, she was working retail in Scottsdale under a different name. No photos, no social media, just gone. I stayed until the end. Most people left within 30 minutes. But I stayed. Antonio Galloni approached with an apologetic smile. Victoria, I owe you an apology. I wrote some things during the scandal that were unfair. You had the facts everyone else had? I said. You can't be blamed for believing a convincing lie. He nodded, relieved. What you did tonight, exposing the shortcuts, the fraud, that's a service to the industry. We talked for 10 minutes. He promised a follow-up piece. It ran in Venice 3 days later. The Fall of Phoenix, How Stolen Recipes and Rushed Production Nearly Fooled an Industry. Jancis Robinson stopped by next. She didn't apologize, but she said, "Your father would be proud of you." And somehow, that meant more than any apology. By 11 p.m., the venue staff was cleaning up, dismantling melted ice sculptures, collecting abandoned glasses. My phone started buzzing. David. Pre-orders are exploding. Website crashed twice. Richard Pemberton. Stock price just jumped 24%. Call me. Restaurant distributors who dropped us. Mrs. Vance, we'd like to discuss re-establishing our partnership. By the time I got back to my hotel, the full story had broken everywhere. New York Times. How Silicon Valley's culture poisoned the wine industry. Vanity Fair. Victoria Vance, the heiress who took back her legacy. Every major outlet picked it up, and the narrative had finally shifted. I wasn't the villain anymore. I was the woman who'd been stolen from, lied about, and who'd quietly built a case while everyone canceled her. Within a week, Vance Estate had pre-orders that tripled our previous record. Restaurants begged to get back on our list. The hotel chain that canceled their $300,000 order came back offering $500,000 for exclusive partnership. Our stock soared to an all-time high, and I didn't do a single interview. The truth did all the work. Adrian was denied bail, too much of a flight risk. He sat in LA County Jail for 4 months, and when trial came, the evidence was overwhelming. Martin's forensics, Jeffrey's paper trail, security footage, Sienna's recorded confession. The jury took 6 hours to convict, 4 years in federal prison, no early parole. Jeffrey sent me a text. It's done. 4 years. I didn't text back. There was nothing left to say. Adrian had made his choices. Now he was living with them. 3 months later, I stood in the vineyard at dawn, barefoot in the cool soil, holding a glass of our 2021 reserve, the vintage my father would have been proud of. The one aged properly, patiently, the way he taught me. 18 months in French oak, 6 weeks of cold stabilization, every step done right. The vines stretched out in perfect rows around me, heavy with grapes ready for harvest, and the morning light turned everything gold. The fog was lifting slowly, revealing the hills beyond. The estate was alive again, thriving, and I was exactly where I belonged. Adrian got 4 years in federal prison in Lompoc. I heard he spends most of his time in the library, reading business books, probably still convinced he can make a comeback. Maybe he will, but it won't be at my expense, not ever again. Sienna disappeared completely. Someone said she's working retail in Scottsdale under her middle name. No social media, no photos, her 3 million followers, her influencer dreams, all buried under screenshots she can never erase. She became a cautionary tale, a meme, and then forgotten. Which is probably what she wanted most. And me. I was standing in my father's vineyard. The one he built with his own hands, the one Adrian tried to steal. The one worth more now than ever. Alone, yes. But not lonely, not bitter, not broken. I took a sip of the wine. Blackberry, oak, lavender. That perfect balance that takes years to achieve. and I smiled. Because I'd learned something my father tried to teach me, but I had to learn the hard way. Revenge isn't loud. It's not screaming or throwing drinks or making Instagram scenes. Real revenge is silent. It's patient. It doesn't announce itself. It just waits. It watches you make mistakes, lets you think you're winning, and then, when you're on stage in front of everyone you wanted to impress, it pulls the floor out with a single document, a single truth you thought you'd buried. I didn't destroy Adrian because I hated him, though I did. I destroyed him because he stole something that wasn't his and thought he could get away with it. Because he treated my father's legacy like just another asset to liquidate, another shortcut to success. And the most beautiful part? He did it to himself. I just held up the mirror. I walked back toward the estate, the sun rising behind me, my father's legacy safe in my hands, and I thought about all the women who've been betrayed, humiliated, discarded for someone younger or shinier. I wanted them to know, you don't have to scream to be heard. You don't have to beg to be respected. Sometimes the best revenge is letting someone destroy themselves while you stand back and watch, with wine in hand, and your empire still standing. I recovered my vineyard and froze his accounts with a single click. One tap on a tablet, and his entire life collapsed. But the next story, it's about a betrayal that cuts so much deeper. It's biological. It's cruel in ways that'll make your blood boil. Imagine being thrown out of your own home in the pouring rain because your husband needs a male heir to unlock a $20 million inheritance. His mistress is pregnant. He thought he'd secured everything, the money, the legacy, the perfect future. But he didn't expect the gift she sent to his luxury baby shower. Not a card. Not congratulations. A drone, flying into the middle of his celebration, carrying a red envelope with a DNA test proving his golden heir didn't have a single drop of his blood. You need to see his face when he opened it. You need to see what happened when his entire family realized they'd been celebrating a lie. Click here right now. You won't believe what she did next.